My name is Brianna, and I didn't realize how much my family saw me as temporary until I came home and found my bedroom full of my brother's boxes. Not a couple things tucked in a corner. Not we moved a few items. I mean stacked plastic bins, taped cardboard, a broken treadmill frame leaning against my old dresser, and a giant label on one box that literally said, Mark, winter clothes. The Mark is my older brother. 32. Married. The kind of guy my parents call responsible because he can walk into a room and talk confidently, even when he's wrong. I was 28, single, working full-time, and I'd come back to my parents' place for one reason. I needed a soft landing while my apartment building in Austin was being renovated after a fire in the laundry room filled half the units with smoke damage. My lease was complicated. Insurance was slow. My job was stable, but everything else felt like wet cardboard. My parents insisted. Stay with us, my mom said. It'll only be a few weeks. Dad added, family takes care of family. That phrase always sounded nice on a phone call. Sounded different when you were standing in the doorway of your childhood room and realizing you didn't even have space to put your suitcase down. I stood there with my bag still on my shoulder, staring at what used to be my bed, now a platform for Mark's junk. My mom came up behind me, cheerful. Oh, don't worry, she said quickly. That's just Mark's stuff. He's reorganizing. Reorganizing. Like my room was a closet at Target. I turned slowly. Why is it in my room? I asked, keeping my voice calm. Mom waved her hand. Because you're not here most of the time, she said. And Mark needed a place for a while. I blinked. I'm here now, I said. I told you I was coming for a few weeks. Mom's smile tightened. Well, yes, but she glanced at the stacked bins like they were furniture. You can still sleep in here. We'll clear a path. Clear a path. Like I was camping through my own life. Dad appeared in the hallway, half listening like he always did when conflict was brewing. What's the issue? He asked. I pointed into the room. My room is full of Mark's storage, I said. Dad shrugged like I'd said the grass needed mowing. It's not your room, he replied. It's our room. Our house. There it was. Technicality that erased my feelings. I nodded once, quiet. Okay, I said. Then where am I supposed to put my things? Mom frowned like I was being difficult. You don't have much, she said. Just live out of your suitcase. I stared at her. For weeks? I asked. She gave me a little laugh like it was cute. Bree, you're always so dramatic. It's temporary. Temporary. That word again. It was always temporary for me. Temporary inconvenience. Temporary guest. Temporary human. Mark, though? Mark was permanent. Mark's stuff could spread like mold and nobody called it dramatic. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Mark, hey, heard you're back. Don't touch my boxes, please. I stared at that message, heat rising in my chest. Don't touch my boxes. Like I was the intruder in my own room. I walked downstairs without saying much because I could feel the old pattern trying to grab me, argue, cry, get labeled crazy, then apologize for having feelings. Instead, I went to the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and did something I hadn't done in a long time. I looked at my bank account. I'd been saving. Quietly. 4 years. Not for a dream house. Just for a future where I didn't have to beg my family for space. I had about $28,600 in savings. Not rich money, but enough for a deposit. Enough for a fresh start if I used it carefully. I stared at the number and felt something shift in me. Because at that moment I understood. I could stay here and fight for square footage in a room full of someone else's junk, or I could spend my savings on one thing my parents couldn't control. The home that was mine. I closed my laptop, looked around my parents' kitchen, and realized this wasn't just about boxes. It was about how they saw me. As a person who would always adapt. always squeeze into the leftovers. Always make it work. And I was done. That night, I slept on the guest bed in the office because there was no path in my childhood room wide enough for me and my suitcase. I lay there listening to the hum of the house, and I made a decision that scared me and thrilled me at the same time. I wasn't going to ask Mark to move his boxes. I wasn't going to beg my parents for fairness. I was going to use my savings exactly the way I'd always been afraid to use it, to buy myself freedom. And the next morning I started quietly hunting for a place, without telling anyone, because if there's one thing I learned in that family, it's this. The moment they know you're leaving, they'll do whatever they can to stop you. The next morning, I woke up with that tight feeling in my chest you get when you know you're trapped in someone else's rules. I padded downstairs in socks and found my mom humming at the counter like nothing had happened. Dad was reading news on his tablet. The normal family performance was already back on. Like I hadn't spent the night in an office because my childhood room was a storage unit. "Morning," Mom chirped. "Coffee?" "Sure," I said quietly and sat at the table with my laptop. I didn't announce what I was doing. I didn't say I'm looking for a place. I just opened a browser and typed short-term rentals Austin studio lease month to month. My mom glanced at the screen and narrowed her eyes. "What are you doing?" she asked, too casual. "Checking work email," I lied smoothly. It wasn't even a dramatic lie. It was self-defense. Because my parents didn't handle information neutrally. They handled it like leverage. 10 a.m. Mark showed up. No warning. Just walked in like the house was his because in their minds it basically was. I heard his voice before I saw him. "Ma, where's my blue bin?" he called loud and entitled. Mom laughed like it was adorable. "Upstairs," she said. "In Brianna's room." I stiffened. Mark's footsteps pounded up the stairs. A minute later I heard boxes shifting. Plastic scraping. Something thumping against the wall. Then he came back down holding a large bin like a trophy. He paused in the kitchen doorway when he saw me. "Oh," he said, tone flat. "You're here?" I looked at him. "Yeah," I said. "I told Mom I'd be here a few weeks." Mark shrugged. "Cool," he said, like my presence was a scheduling inconvenience. Then he pointed toward the stairs. "Just don't mess with my setup." I'm mid-move. My jaw tightened. "Your setup is in my room," I said calmly. Mark gave a short laugh. "It's not your room," he said, echoing Dad. "It's Mom and Dad's." My dad didn't correct him. Of course he didn't. Mark set the bin on the floor and grabbed a banana off the counter like he owned the fruit too. "Anyway," he said, chewing, "I need that room to stay like that for at least another month." Another month. I stared at him. "Why?" I asked. Mark wiped his hands on his jeans. "Because the basement's full and Jenna doesn't want it in the garage," he said, like this was a universal law. Jenna was his wife. The same woman who posted minimalist home vibes on Instagram while using my childhood bedroom as her overflow closet. "So you put it in my room," I said. Mark shrugged. "You're not here," he replied again. Then he smiled like he was being generous. "And you're only here temporarily. You can handle it." Handle it. That word made my stomach twist. Because handle it in my family meant accept disrespect quietly so we don't have to change. Mom chimed in, "Brianna, it's not that bad. You're always so sensitive." Sensitive. Dramatic. Temporary. The three words that used to keep me small. I took a breath and stayed calm. "Okay," I said. Mark looked satisfied, like he'd won a negotiation I hadn't even agreed to. He grabbed his bin and headed out. But right before he left, he turned back and said, "Oh, and don't let your stuff get mixed in. If anything gets lost, that's on you." That sentence hit like ice. He'd filled my room with his junk, and somehow the risk was my fault. When the door closed, my mom poured coffee like she hadn't just watched her son bulldoze me. See, she said breezily. It's fine. Don't start trouble. I looked at her over my mug. I'm not starting trouble, I said quietly. I'm noticing patterns. Mom's smile twitched. What pattern? She snapped, defensive. I kept my voice even. Mark takes space, I said. I adapt. That's the pattern. Dad finally looked up. Stop making everything a competition, he said, tired. Competition. That was their favorite way to dismiss fairness. Like basic respect was a scoreboard. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I went back to my laptop and kept searching. That afternoon, I toured a tiny studio across town. Smelled faintly like paint and old carpet, but it had a door that locked and a kitchen that was mine. The leasing agent smiled and said, "We can do month to month. Deposit is 1 month's rent." I nodded slowly, heart pounding. 1 month deposit was doable. It would hurt my savings, but it wouldn't destroy me. On the way back, I stopped in a parking lot and called my best friend, Danielle. Do you have a minute? I asked. Always, she said. I told her everything in one breath. The storage room, Mark's entitlement, my parents' temporary excuse. Danielle exhaled sharply. Bree, she said, they're treating you like a spare room, not a daughter. I swallowed. I know, I whispered. I'm thinking about using my savings to move out. Danielle didn't hesitate. Do it, she said. You've been saving for freedom. This is what it's for. That night, I went upstairs and tried again to step into my room. I had to turn sideways to squeeze between a stack of boxes and the doorframe. The air smelled like dust and old fabric. My bed was half buried under winter coats and plastic wrap. On my dresser sat a label maker. Mark's label maker. Like he'd claimed the territory. I stood there, swallowed the lump in my throat, and did one thing. I took a photo. Not for social media. For myself. A reminder of what temporary looked like in my family. Then I went back downstairs, opened my laptop, and applied for the studio. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell my dad. I didn't tell Mark. Because I knew what would happen the moment they sensed I was reclaiming control. They'd suddenly offer compromises. They'd suddenly promise to clear the room. They'd suddenly say, we didn't mean it. Not because they cared. Because they didn't want to lose the version of me that stayed. And I was done being that version. The next day, the leasing agent called. Good news, she said. You're approved. My heart slammed. Move-in can be Friday, she added. Friday was 4 days away. 4 days until I had my own door, my own rules, my own space. 4 days until my brother's boxes wouldn't get to decide where I slept. I stared at the wall and felt something bright and scary rise in me. Relief. But also fear, because leaving isn't just a decision. In my family, leaving is an act of rebellion. And I still had to tell them. Friday was coming fast, and the closer it got, the more I realized the hardest part wasn't the money. It was the announcement. In my family, leaving wasn't neutral. Leaving was betrayal. Leaving was, after everything we've done for you. Leaving was the moment they'd scramble to rewrite the story so they still looked like the good guys. So I waited until Thursday night, after dinner, after my mom had finished cleaning the kitchen like cleanliness could reset morality. After my dad had settled into the couch with his "I'm tired" expression. Mark wasn't there, which I knew was strategic in my favor. If I told them with him present, he'd turn it into a loud confrontation. If I told them without him, they'd have to react without his bulldozer energy leading the charge. I walked into the living room with my laptop tucked under my arm like I was carrying a work file. My mom glanced up. "What now?" she asked, already bracing. I sat on the edge of the armchair, calm. "I'm moving out tomorrow," I said. My dad's head lifted slightly. My mom blinked once, slow. "What?" she said like she hadn't heard. "I got a month-to-month studio," I repeated. Move-in is Friday. Mom's face tightened instantly. Why would you do that? She snapped. You're here for free. There it was. Free. Like shelter was a gift I'd been given, not a family obligation they'd offered. Because I don't have a room, I said calmly. I have a storage unit with a path. Mom laughed sharply. Oh my God, she said. You're being dramatic again. Dad rubbed his forehead. Brianna, he sighed, we said it was temporary. I nodded once. So is my studio, I said. Month to month. I'm not buying a mansion. I'm buying peace. Mom sat up straighter. Is this because of Mark? She demanded. I kept my voice steady. It's because of the pattern, I said. Mark needed space, so you gave him mine. And my solution was live out of a suitcase. Dad frowned. It's our house, he said, defensive. We can use rooms however we want. I nodded. Exactly, I said. And I can use my savings however I want. My mom's eyes narrowed at that word. Savings. She heard money and control in the same sentence and immediately tried to grab the wheel. How much is this costing you? She demanded. Brianna, that's irresponsible. You should be saving. I almost laughed because I had been saving. That was the point. I am saving, I said quietly. I'm saving my sanity. Mom's face flushed. Don't talk like that, she snapped. We've supported you. Supported. The word they used when they meant we allowed you to exist under our conditions. Dad tried the softer route, the one he used when he wanted to end conflict without changing anything. Look, he said, we can clear the room. We'll talk to Mark. He can move the boxes. I held his gaze. Tomorrow? I asked calmly. Dad hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. Because my family only offers solutions when they think they're losing control. The solution isn't real. It's a rope they throw to pull you back in. We can start, Mom said quickly. We can move things this weekend. My move-in is tomorrow, I said. Mom's voice sharpened. So you're just going to throw money away to prove a point? I leaned forward slightly, calm. You're calling it throwing money away, I said. I'm calling it buying a door that locks. Silence. My mom's mouth opened, then closed. Dad looked away. Because when you say it plainly, it sounds like what it is, control disguised as concern. My mom stood up, arms crossed. Fine, she snapped. If you want to waste your money, waste it. But don't come crying to us when you can't afford things. I nodded. I won't, I said. That was when she switched to the real weapon. And what are you going to tell people? She hissed. That we kicked you out? That we're terrible parents? There it was. Image. Always image. I'm going to tell them the truth, I said. That my room became Mark's storage and I chose to leave. Mom's eyes widened. Do not embarrass this family, she snapped. I'm not embarrassing anyone, I said calmly. I'm exiting a situation that doesn't work. Dad exhaled. This is unnecessary, he muttered, like my comfort was an inconvenience. Okay, I said softly. It's still happening. I stood up, and that's when my mom's tone changed into something colder. Well, she said, voice tight, since you're moving out, you should pay us back for everything. I froze for a second. Everything? I repeated. Dad's head snapped up. Honey, he started, but my mom continued, eyes locked on me. Food. Utilities. The years we helped you. The braces. Your car insurance when you were younger. All of it, she said, like she was writing an invoice. That's when I understood what she was really doing. She wasn't asking for money. She was trying to make leaving feel expensive enough that I'd stay. I didn't argue. I didn't laugh. I just looked at her calmly and said, "If you think raising me was a loan, then you don't get to call it love." My dad flinched like I'd slapped the room. My mom's face went pale, then red. "How dare you?" she whispered. "How dare I tell the truth?" I replied quietly. Then I walked away. Not storming. Not slamming doors. Just walking back upstairs to pack the last of my things. Careful, quiet, efficient. 9:14 p.m. my phone buzzed. "Mark, Mom said you're moving out. Don't touch my stuff." I stared at the text and felt my mouth go dry. Of course. He'd been informed instantly. Because in that family, information moved fast when it protected Mark. I didn't reply. I kept packing. 10 minutes later, headlights flashed through the window. Car door slammed. Heavy footsteps. Mark wasn't waiting until morning. He was coming now to protect his storage. The front door opened downstairs and I heard his voice, loud and annoyed. "Where is she?" My mom answered in a syrupy tone she only used with him. "Upstairs, honey." Footsteps pounded up the stairs like he was marching into battle. My stomach tightened, but my hands stayed steady on the zipper of my suitcase. Because I knew what was coming. Mark didn't show up to talk. Mark showed up to reclaim space, control, and the story. And I'd just threatened all three by leaving. The doorknob turned hard. My door swung open. Mark stood there, broad shoulders filling the frame, eyes already angry. "You're really doing this?" he snapped. I looked at him calmly. "Yes," I said. "Tomorrow." Mark's jaw clenched. "Where am I supposed to put my stuff?" he demanded. And that, right there, was the moment the whole family dynamic fit into one sentence. Not "Are you okay?" Not "Do you need help?" Just, "Where does my stuff go now that you're leaving the space I claimed?" I met his eyes and said, calm as glass, "In your own house." Mark's face darkened. "You're selfish," he spat. My mom appeared behind him, peeking like she wanted to watch. Dad hovered at the bottom of the stairs, silent. I took a slow breath. "No," I said softly. "I'm done being your storage unit." Mark stepped into my room like he owned it, eyes scanning the piles. "You're not touching anything," he warned. "I'm not," I said. "I'm leaving it exactly as you left it." That made him blink, confused. 'Cause he expected me to fight for the room. He expected tears. He expected begging. He didn't expect my exit to be clean. "Then why are you moving?" he snapped. I looked at him, calm. "Because I deserve a bed that isn't under your winter clothes," I said. Mark laughed bitterly. "Grow up," he sneered. "This is what family does." I nodded once. "Family doesn't store one child like an object," I said. "Family makes room." Mark's eyes flashed. "You always think you're the victim," he growled. I didn't flinch. "And you always think you're entitled," I replied quietly. The air went sharp. My mother sucked in a breath like she couldn't believe I'd spoken. Mark took a step toward me, then stopped, because for the first time my face wasn't pleading. It wasn't scared. It was calm. And calm is hard to intimidate. I lifted my suitcase handle. "I'm done talking," I said. "I'll be gone tomorrow." Mark stared at me like he was trying to decide which weapon would work. Anger, guilt, mockery. Then he did what he always did when he couldn't win with logic. He threatened. "If you leave," he said, voice low, "don't expect us to help you again." I nodded. "That's the point," I said softly. "I'm building a life where I don't need permission." He stood there, breathing hard. My mom whispered, "Mark," like she was proud of him for protecting the family image. Dad finally spoke, quiet and strained. "Enough," he said. Mark scoffed and backed out of the room like I'd done something obscene, and my mother followed him, shooting me one last look that said, "You'll regret this." I closed my door and leaned my forehead against it for a second, not because I was weak, because my body was finally processing what my mind had decided. Tomorrow I was leaving. And in the morning, the last thing I did before I walked out wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. It was the kind of move that made it impossible for them to pretend they were the victims. It was the moment I took my space back without ever touching Mark's boxes. Friday morning came like a deadline I'd been running toward in the dark. I woke up before my alarm, already dressed in leggings and a hoodie, hair twisted up, phone charged, keys in my pocket. My 2 suitcases stood by the door like quiet proof that I meant what I said. The house felt tense in that particular way it gets when people are pretending to sleep but actually listening for your footsteps. I moved quietly down the hallway and stopped in front of my childhood room, my storage unit. The door was half open. Inside, Mark's boxes were stacked the same way, still claiming the air. The label maker still sat on my dresser like a flag planted in soil. I didn't touch a single bin. I didn't move a coat. I didn't even step fully inside. I just stood at the threshold and let myself feel the reality one last time. I had returned home for safety, and I'd been treated like an inconvenience with a suitcase. Then I turned away and went downstairs. In the kitchen, my mom was already up, standing at the counter with her arms crossed like she'd been waiting to intercept me. "So," she said, voice flat, "you're really doing this?" I poured myself a glass of water. My hands didn't shake. "Yes," I said calmly. Dad sat at the table with his coffee, eyes tired, not looking at me directly. TV was muted. Even the house seemed to be holding its breath. Mom's tone switched from cold to falsely reasonable in 1 second, like flipping a channel. "We talked," she said. "We're willing to clear the room." I took a slow sip of water. "Today?" I asked. Mom blinked. "Well, soon," she said, already slipping. "Mark can move things this weekend." There it was. The offer that costs them nothing, later. "I'm moving in today," I said evenly. Mom's jaw tightened. "Brianna, you are being stubborn," she snapped. "This is pride. This is you trying to prove something." I set the glass down. "I'm not proving anything," I said. "I'm choosing a place where I can sleep in my own bed." Dad finally spoke quiet. "You could sleep in the office," he offered, as if that solved the fact that my actual room had been taken. I looked at him. "Dad," I said softly, "you're offering me a backup plan inside a problem you refuse to fix." He flinched and looked down. My mom's eyes narrowed. She switched tactics again, money. "You're going to burn your savings," she warned. "And then what?" "You'll come back. You always come back." That line hit me like she'd been rehearsing it. I nodded once. "I'm not coming back," I said calmly. Her nostrils flared. "You don't know that," she snapped. "Life is expensive." "So is staying," I replied. The air went sharp. I heard footsteps in the hallway behind us. Heavy. Fast. Mark. Of course. He wasn't going to miss my exit. He walked into the kitchen like he owned the doorway, eyes already lit with annoyance. "You're leaving today?" He barked, not even saying hi. My mom immediately softened her tone toward him. "Yes, honey," she said. "She's upset about the room." Mark's eyes flicked to me with contempt. "It's not your room," he said. "Stop acting like you're entitled." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue the old argument. I just said, "I'm leaving so I don't have to debate whether I'm allowed to exist in my own space." Mark snorted. "Good," he said. "Then you won't be in the way." In the way. Like my presence was clutter. Dad's shoulders sagged. My mom smiled tightly like she'd won something. "See," she said to me like this was proof I was the problem. "Mark needs the space. It's practical." Practical. It was always practical when it benefited him. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. "Then you won't mind signing something practical too." My mom blinked. What? I reached into my backpack and pulled out a single printed page I'd prepared the night before. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Clean. It's a simple acknowledgement, I said calmly, laying it on the table. Since you're worried I'll tell people lies, this is just clarity. You asked me to leave, and the reason is that my bedroom was being used as Mark's storage while I was told to live out of a suitcase. The room went silent. Mark's eyes went wide. What is this? He snapped. Mom grabbed the paper and scanned it like it was poison. Absolutely not, she hissed. You're trying to trap us. Dad looked at the page, then away like he already knew it was true and hated that it was written down. I kept my voice calm. It's not a trap, I said. It's the truth in one paragraph because you keep rewriting the story. Mark slammed his palm on the table. You are not putting my name on some document, he snarled. I didn't flinch. Then don't put your stuff in my room, I said quietly. Mom's face turned red. Brianna, she snapped, you are being disgusting. This is family. We don't do paperwork. I nodded once. You do paperwork when it's your comfort, I said. You did paperwork for Mark's mortgage. You do paperwork for taxes. You do paperwork for your image. I'm doing paperwork for my reality. Dad swallowed hard. Honey, he said softly to my mom, it's not wrong. My mom whipped her head toward him like he'd betrayed her. Don't you start, she hissed. Mark scoffed. She's insane, he muttered. Therapy brain. I looked at him calmly. You mean accountability, I said. Mark's face darkened. I'm not signing anything, he snapped. Neither are we, Mom said quickly, like she'd regained control by refusing. I nodded. That's fine, I said. You don't have to sign. But I'm also not going to protect a story that hurts me. Mom's eyes flashed. So you're threatening us, she hissed. No, I said softly. I'm leaving. I picked up my keys and moved toward the front door. My mom stepped in front of me fast. If you walk out like this, she said, voice trembling with anger, you're choosing strangers over family. I looked at her calm. I'm choosing myself, I said. Because you didn't. That sentence landed like a dropped plate. Dad made a small sound like pain. Mark rolled his eyes like he was bored. But my mom froze because she couldn't deny it without admitting the truth. I opened the door and dragged my suitcases onto the porch. Cold air hit my face like relief. My phone buzzed, my leasing agent. Keys ready whenever you arrive. I exhaled and felt my whole body lean toward the future. Then, right on cue, my mom called after me from the doorway in a sweeter voice. Fake rescue. Wait, she said. We can fix this. Stay one more week. Mark will move the boxes. We'll make the room nice again. I turned slowly and looked at her. A week ago you said no guests, I said calmly. Then Madison filled the house. Yesterday you said you'd clear the room soon. Today you're saying one more week. Your timelines always move when it's my comfort, not when it's Mark's. Mom's smile cracked. You're impossible, she snapped. Dad stepped forward, voice low. Brianna, please. Your mom's just upset. I looked at him with a steadiness that surprised even me. Dad, I said quietly, I'm not responsible for managing her feelings about consequences. He looked away. Tessa, no Danielle, pulled up a minute later in her car like a cavalry that didn't need permission. She got out, took one look at my face, and didn't ask questions. Let's go, she said. My mom's eyes narrowed at her. Who is that? She snapped like my support system was an insult. A friend, I said calmly. The kind you don't make room for. Mark muttered, good luck, with a smug smile like he expected me to fail. My mom didn't even say goodbye. She just stood there, arms crossed, like she was waiting for me to come to my senses and crawl back inside. I didn't. I loaded my suitcases into Danielle's trunk and got into the passenger seat. As we pulled away, I looked at the house one last time and realized something that made my throat tighten. They weren't watching me leave like parents who were sad. They were watching like landlords whose tenant finally stopped paying in silence. Halfway down the street, my phone buzzed again. A text from Mom, and "You will regret this." And then, 10 seconds later, another from Mark. "Mark, if any of my stuff goes missing, you're paying for it." I stared at the messages and felt the absurdity of it settle in. I hadn't touched his boxes. I hadn't moved anything. I'd left the room exactly as he'd claimed it. And still, they were trying to pin guilt on me as I walked out the door. Danielle glanced over. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said. "I'm just realizing." I could have stayed and been perfect and quiet, and they still would have found a way to blame me. Danielle nodded once. "That's why you leave," she said. When I got the keys to my studio, the leasing agent handed them over like it was nothing. 2 pieces of metal. A simple transaction. But in my body, it felt like something massive. I stood in the empty room, no boxes, no labels, no path to clear, and I locked the door behind me just to hear the click. The sound was so small and so powerful that my eyes burned. Because that click was proof. Nobody could take this space and tell me it was temporary. I set my bag down on the floor and exhaled. Then my phone buzzed again, this time a call from my mom. I watched it ring. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel that panic to answer. I didn't feel the need to explain. I didn't feel the need to fix. I let it ring out. And in that silence, I understood the real beginning of my new home wasn't furniture. It was boundaries. The first night in my new studio, I didn't even unpack properly. I laid a blanket on the floor, used my suitcase as a pillow, and stared at the ceiling like I was waiting for someone to burst in and tell me I didn't deserve it. That's what happens when you grow up in a house where your space is conditional. Even freedom feels suspicious at first. I locked the door 3 times just to hear the click. Then I finally fell asleep. The next morning, sunlight came through the blinds and hit the bare wall like it was trying to convince me this was real. I made coffee in my tiny kitchen, standing in the silence, and I felt something I hadn't felt at my parents' house in years. Calm. No footsteps outside my door. No family meeting. No rules that changed depending on who asked. Just me. And of course, that's exactly when my phone exploded. First a call from Mom at 8:03 a.m. I didn't answer. Then another. Then a text. "Mom, we need to talk. This is ridiculous." Another text immediately after. "Mom, your father is devastated. Call us." Devastated. That word was always used like a leash, like my job was to fix their feelings. I stared at the screen and took a slow breath. I replied with one sentence, calm and firm. "Me, I'm safe. I'm not discussing this right now." Then I put my phone face down and ate toast like a person with a normal life. 9:17, Dad texted. "Dad, can we at least know your address?" I didn't reply. Not because I was being cruel, because I finally understood how addresses worked in my family. Addresses were access. And access was control. Around noon, Mark texted me a photo. It was one of his boxes, open like he was inspecting it. "Mark, I'm missing a pair of boots. If you took anything by accident, you need to return it." I felt my jaw tighten. I hadn't touched his things. Not one box. Not one bin. But Mark's favorite trick was accusation. "Accuse first, so you're always defending." I didn't defend. I replied calmly. "Me, I didn't touch your stuff. Please stop contacting me unless it's factual." Mark, LOL. "Factual, you're dramatic." I didn't answer. Because arguing with Mark was like arguing with a vending machine. You could kick it all day, it still wouldn't give you what you wanted. That afternoon, Danielle came over with 2 folding chairs and a cheap pizza. "Housewarming," she said. I laughed at the word housewarming because the place looked like a storage unit too, just my own. But it was mine. We sat on the floor and ate like teenagers. "So," Danielle said carefully, "what's next?" I hesitated. "Next is staying gone," I admitted. "Because they're going to try to pull me back." "How?" she asked. I exhaled. "They'll pretend they're sorry," I said. "Then they'll offer something. Then they'll guilt. Then they'll rage. Then they'll act like I'm unstable. It's a cycle." Danielle nodded slowly. "Then you don't re-enter the cycle," she said. "You build a new one." That night, my mom showed up at my job. Not physically, I mean she tried to. She called my office line. Twice. Then she left a voicemail. Her voice was sweet, shaky, public mode. "Hi, this is Brianna Carter's mother. I'm just trying to reach her. It's an emergency." Emergency. The word that makes people panic and drop boundaries. The problem? In my family, emergency usually meant you're not obeying. I listened once, then deleted it. The next morning, I got a message from my aunt. "Aunt Kelly, your mom says you're having some kind of episode. Are you okay?" Episode. There it was. The story rewrite. Therapy turned into instability. Boundaries turned into a breakdown. I stared at the message, heart pounding once, then settling. This was exactly what I expected. I wrote one calm paragraph back. "Me, I'm okay. No episode." I moved out because my room was being used as Mark's storage and I was told to live out of a suitcase. "I'm safe and working. Please don't worry," Aunt Kelly replied. "Aunt Kelly, that's not what she said." "I know," I thought. That's the point. The next twist came 3 days later. Dad texted me, "Dad, we cleared your room. It's clean now. Come back and stay until you're stable." Stable. Like I was a patient, not a daughter. I stared at the message and felt my throat tighten. They cleared the room now. Of course they did. Not because I needed it. 'Cause I left. And they wanted the old me back, the one who adapted. "They're trying to reel you in," Danielle said when I showed her the text. "They think if they offer the thing you asked for, you'll forgive everything." "But I didn't even ask," I whispered. That was the part that hurt. They would only fix the obvious disrespect when it threatened their control. Not when it threatened my comfort. That weekend, something else happened that made the puzzle click. Jenna, Mark's wife, accidentally texted me instead of Mark. "Jenna, did you tell her we're selling the house?" I stared at the message. Selling the house? Then another message came immediately after. "Jenna, sorry, wrong person. Please ignore." My stomach dropped. I didn't ignore it. I just sat there in my empty studio feeling that cold clarity spread through me. Mark didn't need storage because he was reorganizing. Mark needed storage because he and Jenna were doing something bigger, something they hadn't told my parents yet or hadn't told me. I didn't respond to Jenna. I didn't ask questions. I did what I always did now. I kept receipts. Because if they were selling something or moving or planning, it meant my childhood room wasn't an accident. It was a strategy. My space had been taken because they assumed I would always make room for everyone else's plans. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it ring. It rang again. I picked up on the third ring because something in my gut felt off. "Hello?" I said cautiously. "Hi," a man's voice said. "Is this Brianna Carter? This is Mike from Lone Star Storage. Your mother's name is listed as an emergency contact. We can't reach Mark. His payment bounced. Storage." I felt my whole body go still. Mark had a storage unit and it bounced. Suddenly the boxes in my room made sense. My brother wasn't responsible. He was hiding. He was using my parents' house as free overflow because he'd messed up financially and didn't want them to know. And my room, my space, was the easiest place to dump the evidence. I'm not responsible for that account, I said calmly. Please remove me. Of course, the man said. Just, if you speak to him, tell him we need payment by Monday or the unit will go to auction. Auction. I hung up and stared at the wall. That's why he needed my room. Not because he was reorganizing, because he was broke and hiding it. And if my parents found out, the golden child narrative would crack. My throat tightened, not with anger, clarity. Mark had been using my room as a shield. My parents had allowed it because they trusted him more than they respected me. I didn't call my mom. I didn't call Mark. I wrote the facts down in my notes. Mark has a storage unit account. Payment bounced. He couldn't reach Mark, called Mom as emergency contact. Boxes moved to my room equals likely overflow. Then I did something that felt like a turning point. I blocked Mark. Not as revenge, as a boundary. And I muted my mom's calls for the rest of the weekend. Because the next step wasn't to expose him immediately. The next step was to decide how I wanted to handle the truth. I could blow it up and watch the family implode. Or I could use it strategically, to protect myself, to set boundaries, and to stop being the scapegoat for Mark's mess. And that decision came sooner than I expected. 'Cause Monday morning my mom showed up at my door. She didn't have my address, so she must have gotten it from somewhere. From Dad. Or from my job records. Or from guilt-tripping Danielle. And the look on her face wasn't rage. It was fear. Real fear. Kind you see when the golden child's mess finally leaks through. Monday morning, I was halfway through a Zoom onboarding call when my phone started vibrating like it wanted to crawl off the table. I ignored it. Then there was a knock. Not the polite kind. The urgent, repetitive kind, like whoever was outside believed they were entitled to the inside. I muted my mic, slid my laptop slightly to the side, and walked to the door on quiet feet. I looked through the peephole and my stomach dropped. Mom, standing in the hallway in her I'm the victim outfit, nice coat, hair done, lips pressed like she'd been rehearsing a speech in the car. She knocked again, louder. Brianna, she called like I was 12 and hiding after breaking a lamp. I took a slow breath, unlocked the deadbolt, and opened the door, but not all the way. Just enough that she could see my face. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I stayed calm. Mom's eyes widened like she'd expected me to crumble. Thank God, she said quickly. You have to talk to me. I kept my hand on the door. I'm working, I said evenly. Her gaze flicked past my shoulder, trying to see inside. I just need 5 minutes, she insisted. It's important. Important. Emergency. The same tactic as always. I didn't move. You can say it here, I replied. Mom's mouth tightened. She tried to push the door open with her body, a tiny forward lean like it was automatic. I held it steady. Her eyes flashed. Are you seriously not going to let your own mother in? She hissed. I stayed calm. No, I said. One word. No apology. No explanation. Just no. She blinked like I'd slapped her. Then she switched to sweet voice, the one she used when she wanted compliance without looking controlling. Brianna, honey. I'm scared, she said. Scared. Real fear, not performance. My chest tightened slightly. Why? I asked, still calm. Mom swallowed. Her eyes darted left and right like she didn't want the hallway to hear. It's Mark, she whispered. There it was. The golden child's name, the family's true emergency. I didn't step back. I didn't invite her in. I just waited. Silence is powerful when someone is used to you filling it with reassurance. Mom exhaled hard. His storage unit called, she said, voice shaking with rage now. They said his payment bounced. They said they'll auction his things. She looked at me like she expected me to gasp, to leap into action, to become the fixer. My face stayed calm. Okay, I said. Mom's eyes widened. Okay, she snapped. Do you understand what this means? He's been hiding bills. He's been lying. And now your father is furious and Jenna is crying and Mark… She cut herself off, swallowing. Mark won't answer. I nodded once. So call Mark, I said. Mom's mouth opened, offended. I have, she snapped. Then she lowered her voice again. We need your help. Help. There it was, the reason she came. Not to apologize. Not to ask how I'm doing. Not to acknowledge what they did to me. She was at my door because their golden child's mess had finally leaked and they needed a scapegoat to absorb the stress. I kept my voice even. What kind of help? I asked. Mom's eyes flicked to my face, calculating. Well, she said slowly, you have savings. I felt my stomach drop, but my face didn't change. Excuse me? I asked quietly. Mom leaned closer like she was sharing a secret. Just temporarily, she rushed. A loan. Mark just needs to cover the storage payment and a few late fees. We'll pay you back. Or he will. You know how these companies are. I stared at her. My savings. The money I used to escape their double standard. She had come to my new door, my one safe boundary, and she wanted to pull my money back into the old system. I took a slow breath. No, I said. Mom's face froze. Brianna, she whispered sharply, don't be selfish. This is your brother. I held her gaze. The same brother who used my room as storage, I said calmly. Mom's eyes flashed. That's not the point, she snapped. The point is family helps family. I nodded once. You're right, I said quietly. Family helps family. But your version of family is I help, Mark takes. She looked stunned, then angry. How dare you, she hissed. After everything, I cut in, still calm, you cleared my room only after I left. You called me dramatic when I didn't have a bed. And now you're at my door because Mark's consequences finally reached you. Mom's face reddened. You think you're so grown up now, she spat. Little studio apartment, little attitude. I didn't flinch. Yes, I said. I'm grown up enough to say no. She tried again, switching to guilt with tears. Her eyes glossed over. Your father is falling apart, she whispered. He can't sleep. He feels like a failure. I watched her carefully. This part was always designed to hook my empathy. And it worked a little. I did feel for Dad. But feeling for Dad didn't mean paying for Mark. I stayed steady. Then Dad should talk to Mark, I said. Mom's jaw tightened. He tried, she snapped. Mark isn't picking up. I nodded. Then Mark can handle his own mess, I replied. Mom's voice rose. He can't. He's stressed. Trust. The same word they used to excuse everything Madison did. So was I said quietly. When my room disappeared. When I slept in the office. When I was told to live out of a suitcase. But my stress didn't matter. It was dramatic. Mom's face twisted like she wanted to deny it but couldn't. Then she did what she always did when logic cornered her. She attacked my character. You're bitter, she snapped. You're punishing us because you're jealous of Mark. I almost smiled at the predictability. I'm not jealous, I said calmly. I'm done financing his comfort with my discomfort. Mom's eyes darted past me again, desperate. At least let me come in, she demanded. We can talk like adults. I kept my hand on the door. We are talking, I said. Adults can talk without crossing boundaries. She stared at the door like it insulted her. Then she hissed, "So you're really going to let your brother lose his things?" I kept my voice steady. "He already used my things," I said. "My room, my space, my peace. He didn't ask. He didn't care. Now he can learn what it feels like to deal with a consequence." Mom's eyes went wide, furious. "You sound evil," she whispered. I exhaled slowly. "No," I said. "I sound tired." She opened her mouth to shout, but a door down the hall opened and a neighbor peeked out. Mom instantly changed her face into polite public mode. "Oh, hi," she said, sweet as syrup. The neighbor nodded awkwardly and disappeared. Mom turned back to me, voice low and venomous. "You're going to regret this," she hissed. I nodded once, calm. "I already regret staying as long as I did," I said. Then I added, still even, "You're not getting my address from me again. And you're not coming back here uninvited." Mom's mouth fell open. "Uninvited? I'm your mother." I didn't argue the title. I just repeated the boundary. "Don't come here again," I said. I started to close the door. Mom thrust her hand into the gap. "Wait," she snapped. "At least tell me how much you have in savings." That line was so blunt, so revealing, I felt my stomach go cold. She wasn't even pretending anymore. "Goodbye, Mom," I said calmly, and I closed the door firmly, not slamming, not shaking. Just final. I locked the deadbolt. Then the chain. Then I stood with my back against the door for a second, breathing slowly, heart pounding, not with fear but with a strange relief. 'Cause for the first time I had said no to the family emergency machine. I went back to my laptop and unmuted my mic like nothing had happened. My coworkers talked about timelines and tasks and onboarding. Normal life. Quiet life. The kind of life my parents always treated like optional for me. After my call, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Dad. 1 text from Dad, "Dad, please. Mark is in trouble." 1 text from Mark. "Mark, Mom says you won't help." Wow. You always were selfish. I stared at his message and felt my chest tighten, not because it hurt, but because it confirmed everything. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just entitlement dressed as insult. I didn't reply. I opened my notes and wrote, "They came to my door for money. Not for me." Then I did something I'd never done before. I called the storage company back. Not to pay. Not to rescue. To ask one question that would protect me. "Hi," I said calmly. "I'm not responsible for Mark's account. I need confirmation in writing that I'm not listed anywhere as a payer or guarantor." The man on the phone sounded relieved. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "You're not financially responsible. Your mother was listed as emergency contact. That's all." Closed my eyes and exhaled. Good. Because I already knew what my family would try next. If they couldn't get my money willingly, they'd try to guilt me into it publicly. And if that didn't work, they'd try to paint me as the villain. But this time I had receipts. And the next step, the thing that truly flipped the power, was what happened when Mark finally showed up, furious, and demanded the one thing he always demanded from me, space. Only this time, he was standing outside my door. My door. My rules. My home. And he was about to learn that he couldn't store his life inside mine anymore. Tuesday evening, I got home from a long day of onboarding, brain fried, shoulders tight, craving nothing but silence. I walked up the stairs to my second-floor studio, keys already in my hand, and that's when I saw him. Mark, standing outside my door like he owned the hallway. Arms crossed. Jaw tight. The same posture he used at my parents' house when he wanted everyone to fall in line. My stomach flipped once, but I didn't back away. This was my door. My lease. My space. I walked up calmly, stopped 2 feet away, and didn't unlock anything. "What are you doing here?" I asked, voice even. Mark's eyes raked over me like he was assessing whether intimidation would work. "Relax," he said. "We need to talk." I didn't move. "You can text," I replied. Mark scoffed. "You're really going to act like I'm some stranger?" He snapped. I kept my tone calm. "You showed up uninvited," I said. "So yes, you're a visitor." That word visitor hit him like an insult. His nostrils flared. "Mom said you wouldn't help," he said, voice rising. "I can't believe you." I nodded once. "Can," I said. Mark's eyes flashed. "You have money," he snapped. "You're sitting on savings while your own brother is about to lose everything." I stared at him. "Everything?" I repeated softly. Mark's jaw tightened. "The storage unit," he said. "My stuff." "Jenna's stuff." He stopped himself, then pushed harder. "Look, it's not a big deal. Just pay the late fee and I'll pay you back." Late fee. He described it as a tiny, harmless number on purpose. "How much?" I asked calmly. Mark hesitated for half a second. "Like $2,000, he said quickly. $2,000. And I could feel the lie in the speed of it. $2,000, I repeated, neutral. "Yeah," he said, eyes hard. "And don't lecture me about responsibility. You think you're so grown up now because you ran away." I didn't bite. "I didn't run away," I said calmly. "Mom told me to pack." Mark rolled his eyes. "Mom was emotional," he sneered. "You know how she gets. You know how she gets." The phrase that always excused her and blamed me for reacting. Mark stepped closer, lowering his voice into something more threatening. "Brianna," he said, "if you don't help, you're going to tear this family apart." I almost smiled at how dramatic he was, considering he called me dramatic my entire life. "You're not tearing the family apart," I said softly. "Your unpaid bills are." Mark's face darkened. "Don't act superior," he snapped. "You don't know what it's like to have real responsibilities." I looked at him steadily. "I do," I said. "That's why I pay my bills." His eyes widened, furious. "You're such a—" he started, then caught himself when a neighbor door cracked open across the hall. Mark instantly softened his tone, forcing a smile like he was having a friendly chat. "Hey," he called, waving. The neighbor nodded and shut the door again. Performance was automatic. He turned back to me, voice low again. "Stop making me look bad," he hissed. I didn't raise my voice. "You're doing that yourself," I said calmly. Mark's face twisted. "Fine," he snapped. "If you won't pay, at least let me store some boxes here temporarily." I froze. There it was. The real request. Not the storage unit. Not the family. Face. My space. The same pattern repeating, just in a new hallway. Mark continued like he couldn't hear how insane he sounded. "Just a couple bins," he said. "I'll keep them in a corner. It's a studio, yeah, but you've got room. You're single. No kids. You can handle it." I stared at him and something cold and clean moved through me. The exact same sentence he'd used at my parents' house, just upgraded. "You can handle it." "No," I said. Mark blinked. "What?" he snapped. "No," I repeated, calm. "You're not storing anything here." Mark's face flushed. "Are you kidding me?" He barked, forgetting the neighbor. "It's temporary." "Temporary. Of course." I held his gaze. "Temporary becomes permanent in this family," I said quietly. "And I'm done." Mark's jaw clenched. "You're selfish," he hissed. "You've always been selfish." I nodded once. "No," I said. "I've always been the one who made it work for you." Mark's eyes flicked, and for a split second I saw panic under the anger. Because he wasn't here to talk. He was here because he didn't have options. And then, because he was angry and sloppy, he said the one sentence that exposed everything. "You don't get it," he snapped. "If Mom and Dad find out the Helic is maxed, they'll freak out." Helic. My body went still. Home equity line of credit. A loan against the house. My parents' house. My childhood home. Mark immediately realized what he'd said. His face froze. "What?" I asked softly, still calm. Mark's eyes darted like he could rewind time. "Nothing," he snapped too fast. "You heard me wrong." I didn't move. "You just said the Helic is maxed," I repeated. "Why are you using a Helic on Mom and Dad's house?" Mark's breathing changed. Faster. Sharper. His anger flared again as cover. "Because they offered," he barked. "Because they believe in me. Because I'm not a loser like," he stopped himself, then sneered. "Because I'm building something." I felt my throat tighten. This wasn't just a bounced storage payment. This was bigger. Much bigger. "So you didn't just use my room as storage," I said quietly. "You used Mom and Dad's house as collateral." Mark's face turned red. "Shut up," he hissed. "You don't know what you're talking about." I kept my voice steady. "I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said. "Because the storage company called Mom. And now you're here trying to store boxes in my apartment. That means you're drowning." Mark stepped closer, eyes wild. "You are not telling them," he growled. I didn't flinch. "I'm not responsible for managing your lies," I said calmly. Mark's voice dropped into something ugly. "If you tell them, you'll destroy Mom," he hissed. "She'll have a heart attack. Is that what you want?" There it was, the nuclear guilt. The same tactic my mom used, now in Mark's mouth. I stared at him, calm, and said, "If the truth destroys her, the lie already did." Mark's face contorted with rage. "You think you're so wise," he spat. "Therapy princess." I nodded once. "No," I said. "I'm just done being your storage." Mark's hands clenched. Then he did something that told me he'd lost control. He slammed his palm against my door. "Open it," he demanded. "Let me in." I didn't move. "No," I said again. Mark stared at me like he couldn't compute someone refusing him. Then he leaned in, voice low and dangerous. "You owe me," he hissed. I met his eyes. "I owe you nothing," I said quietly. Then I did something that ended the confrontation without drama. I pulled out my phone, held it up, and calmly said, "If you don't step away from my door right now, I'm calling the police." Mark froze. His eyes widened. "You wouldn't," he whispered. I stayed calm. "Try me," I said. Silence. His jaw worked like he was chewing through humiliation. Then he backed up one step, hands raised like I was insane. "Wow," he said bitterly. "You really are crazy." I nodded once. "And you're really desperate," I replied. Mark stared at me a moment longer, then hissed, "Fine. Keep your little box. Don't come crying when the family cuts you off." He turned and stomped down the stairs, leaving his entitlement behind like a bad smell. I stood there for a second, shaking slightly, not with fear but adrenaline. Then I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and locked it again. Triple click. Safe. I leaned against the wall and stared at the floor, heart pounding because my brother had just accidentally handed me the missing piece. The reason my parents bent every rule for him. They weren't just favoring him. They were financially tied to his mess. And that meant the boxes in my room weren't random. They were a symptom of something rotten and hidden. The next move was delicate. If I confronted my parents, they might explode and still protect him. If I stayed silent, Mark would keep bleeding them dry, and eventually they'd blame me for not helping. So I did the calmest, cleanest thing I could. I asked Dad to meet me alone. Not at their house. Not in my apartment. Neutral ground. coffee shop. And what I told him there wasn't emotional. It was one sentence that changed his face completely. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was scared of Mark coming back. My door was locked and I wasn't 12 anymore. I didn't sleep because my brain kept replaying one phrase like a flashing warning sign. Helic is maxed. My parents weren't just emotionally invested in my brother. They were financially entangled. And in my family, money was the hidden engine behind every rule, every excuse, every double standard. If Mark was using a home equity line on their house, it meant two things were true at the same time. My parents knew more than they admitted, or they knew less than they should. Either way, the fallout was coming. The next morning, I texted Dad one line. Me, can we meet for coffee today? Just you and me. It's important. He replied fast. Dad, where? That speed told me he was already stressed, probably from my mom's panic and Mark's silence. I picked a neutral cafe halfway between my place and theirs. Not their house. Not mine. A place with witnesses and a timer. Dad showed up 5 minutes early, hands wrapped around a paper cup like it was the only solid thing in his day. He looked older than he had 2 weeks ago. He sat across from me, eyes tired. Your mom said you're being difficult, he started carefully, like he was testing the temperature. I nodded once. I'm being clear, I said calmly. Dad exhaled, rubbing his forehead. Brianna, your mother is overwhelmed, he murmured. Mark's storage unit? I know, I said quietly. Dad blinked. You know? He asked. I looked him in the eyes and said the one sentence that changed his face instantly. Mark showed up at my door last night and asked to store boxes in my apartment. Dad's eyes widened, then tightened with anger. He did what? He whispered. I nodded. And when I said no, I continued calm. He got sloppy. He said, if Mom and Dad find out the Helic is maxed, they'll freak out. Dad went still. His entire body. Like someone had turned him into a statue. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. His eyes dropped to the table, and I watched the realization happen in real time. He said that, Dad repeated, voice hollow. Yes, I said softly. Dad swallowed hard. How would he even know? He started, then stopped himself because the answer was obvious. Either Mark was involved, or Mark was the reason. Dad's hand trembled around his cup. Your mother, she told me it was for repairs, he whispered, more to himself than to me. Repairs. That word. Kind of vague label families use to hide big problems. I didn't pile on. I just stayed calm. Dad, I said gently, I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you because I'm not going to be used as storage or as a bank while Mark digs deeper. Dad's eyes lifted to mine, and for the first time in a long time, I saw fear behind his authority. How much does he need? He asked quietly. He tried to make it sound small, I said. But it isn't small if he's desperate enough to come to my door. Dad nodded slowly, jaw clenched. Your mother said you had savings, he said, and there was shame in the words. I didn't flinch. She came to my door and asked about my savings, I said calmly. Dad's face tightened. She went to your apartment? He whispered. I nodded. Uninvited, I said. And I told her no. Dad stared at the table like he couldn't decide whether to be angry at her, at Mark, or at himself. Then he exhaled, long and tired. I failed you, he said quietly. The words surprised me. Not because they were dramatic, but because they were honest. My throat tightened. I don't need you to punish yourself, I said softly. I need you to stop protecting him at my expense. Dad nodded once, like that landed. You're right, he said. His voice was quiet but different now, less passive. We've been covering. The admission cracked something open. Covering what? I asked gently. Dad hesitated, then said it plainly. Mark and Jenna wanted to buy an investment property, he said. They didn't qualify the way they wanted, and Mark said it was temporary. Temporary again. So we took the Helek, Dad continued, eyes glassy with resentment, and he promised he'd pay it down fast. My stomach dropped. And he didn't, I said. Dad's jaw clenched. He paid the first few months, he admitted. Then things got tight. So you let him use my room as storage, I said quietly, connecting the dots, because his storage unit bounced and you were trying to hide how bad it was. Dad flinched, like it hurt to hear it said that way. Your mother insisted it was simpler, he whispered. She didn't want drama. I nodded. She didn't want visibility, I corrected softly. Dad stared at me for a long moment, then said the line I'd waited my whole life to hear. I'm done covering, he said. His voice was low, but there was steel in it. I didn't celebrate. I didn't get smug. I just nodded once. Good, I said. Because I'm done being the spare room. Dad exhaled, then looked at me carefully. Are you okay? He asked, and for the first time the question felt real. I swallowed. I am, I said. I have my own place. I'm working. I'm building stability. Dad nodded slowly, eyes watering a little. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. My chest tightened, because hearing that from him felt both healing and late. Still, it mattered. We sat in silence for a second, the kind of silence that isn't avoidance. It's processing. Then Dad said, Your mom is going to panic. I nodded. I know, I said. But panic isn't my responsibility anymore. Dad looked down, then back up. Will you talk to her? He asked cautiously. I considered it. Not right now, I said calmly. Not unless she can speak to me without blaming me for Mark's mess. Dad nodded once. Fair, he said. When we stood to leave, Dad paused and said, I won't give them your address. I blinked. You already did, I said quietly. Dad's face tightened with guilt. I know, he whispered. I won't do it again. That mattered too. Not a perfect fix. A boundary. A start. That evening, I got one text from Mom. Mom, your father told me you're filling his head with poison. I stared at it, then put my phone down. Because I knew how the story always went. If Mark was in trouble, it was never Mark's fault. It was my attitude. My therapy. My bitterness. But this time there was a difference. Dad knew. Dad had said the word covering. And when Dad stops covering, the golden child finally has to face daylight. I didn't know exactly how it would play out, screaming, crying, denial, but I knew one thing with certainty. My savings didn't buy me furniture. They bought me a door that kept chaos out. And I was going to protect that door with everything I had. 'Cause my brother used my room as storage. My parents used my silence as a cushion. And I used my savings for a new home, where nobody could stack their mess on top of my life again.